of Shay's first night in the Cross. So she arrives, you literally see her get off the bus from, you know, Brisbane or kind of like Coolangatta area. And the whole film is set in one night. And so it's this, you know, first night of her coming to, you know, crazy Sydney. And yeah, and all that it entails.
I would describe Holly as a fairly stoic character. She's very strong and her values are in the right place, but she's tortured by the predicament that she's in.
Ligurian is a guy, when we first meet him, he's already at the end of his tether. He's at the end of a big 25-year journey as a police officer and as a corrupt officer. You know, nobody becomes a police officer to be corrupt. You know, everybody starts out thinking that they're going to change the world.
John and I had recently moved to King's Cross. We're still in that flat today. And it was a story about people that we walk past every day in order to get to our door, like women on the streets, making a bit of money.
Pretty much there's something happening 24/7. The place really, now these days, now that there's 24-hour liquor trading, it never closes. And you see all sorts of things.
It was really important for me as an actor, as a woman, that the lead roles were female. I mean, not that I don't want to tell men's stories at all, but I think that there's a lot of people in the country doing that already, and not too many people telling female stories.
It's just an incredibly energetic, sometimes dangerous, but mainly just fascinating and ever-changing sort of vibe that goes on there. So it started to influence what we wrote.
What I set out with John to do, I think, is to give women a larger share, but also to tell a particular story, the one that we saw out our window every day, or you know, we walk past to get to our front door every day.
After I'd read X, I thought, well, it was definitely a low-budget film, but it really understood that world of low-budget filmmaking and what was kind of achievable within that. And it also had a really strong story. It was extremely well written. He and Belinda had worked together on it over a number of years. And you could see the film as you were reading the script. And I thought, well, this is actually a great opportunity to kind of work in genre, and it was also at a time when I think Australian funding bodies were recognising that there was a place for low budget genre in their slate. So it was a real thing about sort of timing, I think, for me, why I was attracted to the project at that time.
Because John and Belinda have had this script in their heads and working with it for 10 years or thereabouts, John had a very clear idea of stylistically what he wanted to do. So it was just a matter of me being able to interpret it and hopefully push it a bit further than where we both thought it could go with the material that was shot. The editing style is a bit eclectic. There's no one way of presenting this film, and it was never intended to be. It's mayhem, and it is, the story is mayhem. It happens within a really quick sort of 10-12 hour space of time. So it's kind of an edit that won't allow you to rest.
The fact that we've used mostly unknown actors, I think, has worked extremely well for the film. They're not people we see a lot on TV or in other feature films, and in Australia I think that can be a bit of a problem. But I think that, you know, we managed to get really fine actors, many of who've done a lot of work in theatre, and give it a kind of a freshness.
Well, when I first read the script, actually, me and John did a film called Acolytes when I was 16. So I read the script when I was 16, and it was pretty intimidating. Like when I first read it at that age, I was like, okay, like I was definitely up for the challenge, but I was like, oh my God, all these things going through my head, like how is this going to be shot?
John had already worked with Hanna Mangan-Lawrence. She was in his earlier film Acolytes. As a 15-year-old, she now just turned 18. She's grown into a kind of a stunningly beautiful but very, very talented young actor. So I knew before the casting process started that we already had her on board. And I think for us the biggest challenge was really finding the character of Holly, the high-class girl who had to be around the age of 30.
I remember when I first read the script, my agent had just sent it through, and I was like, okay, there's just a cool new script to read. But before I could even prepare for the audition, it turned out there was going to be a clash with me going back over to New Zealand to shoot season 2 of Spartacus. So that was that, you kind of just put it aside. But when I was reading it that first time, I was like, okay, well, I don't think I'm right for the main older girl. I felt that I was too young for the role. I felt that my hair was too light for the role because it said that she had brown hair, and for some reason actors take that kind of thing seriously. And so there was this other role, like a much smaller but cool role that stood out to me called Rose. And so I was like, I just said to my agent, I could audition for that role and maybe we could work that around with the Spartacus dates. But, I don't know, it turned out that that didn't happen either. But then I got a phone call about a week later saying, Spartacus has moved back like 3 or 4 weeks. Turns out we could just squeeze in X. And I was like, awesome, it's absolutely what I wanted. But they're like, they want to see you for the main older prostitute role. And I was like, really? Okay. I've got like a day to make this, very impressionable. And I wanted it. It was one of those roles that was really challenging for me, but something I connected with straight away.
John and I have been friends for a long time, and we've worked together before on Red Bull. So, I love to work with John because he's he's just a guy that he's got the most positive energy you ever find on set. He's a can-do guy, and he's a let's do it now, let's do it quickly, let's do something out of the ordinary. The fact that he uses Mark Pugh, behind the camera, and the way Mark likes to move the camera around sometimes can be quite confronting for actors because you're never off. You're not out on the scene, having your eye line waiting for your turn to be in where they're doing a master shot and punch in. It's not like that at all. You are on the whole time when Mark's behind the camera. And it really suits John and Belinda's writing as well. So yeah, John, and John's a dear friend, and I'd follow him to the gates of hell. He's really one of the great filmmakers of this country, in my opinion.
The relationship between Holly and Ligurian is very complex because I think it's that very, very delicate line between passion and perversion. He
sees her as his salvation in many ways, and despite the fact that she's a sex worker, she's the one good thing in his life.
Of course, he still pays her to have that relationship and to go to bed with him, but they are bound by something deeper. To each other, they're almost like pillars, something you can hang on to as the massive tidal wave sweeps in. They're trying to desperately grab onto each other to stay alive. And he's the guy she turns to when she's in trouble, when she's got some guy on her back, but also I think for that tenderness and intimacy. But there's a danger there, and she knows that. There's something not right about him and about the dark, corrupt world that he's in. And she's a survivor, so she knows that she's got to get out.
So when she first gets there, she meets this prostitute, Holly, and by chance she gives her a job, and in giving her a job, she kind of almost, although they do go on this big adventure, she does save Shay, basically. She doesn't end up in, there's another character called Cindy, who's younger than me, she's 14, and so she's on the streets, she's a prostitute, she's a heroin addict, she's got her pimp. And by Holly picking me up this night, my first night, it saves Shay, and Shay feels real warmth, real kind of almost motherly, that Holly's looking after her.
And the only difference between, say, Shay and Carleen is Holly. So is somebody saving her. And the only difference between Holly and the doppelganger is Catherine. You know, somebody, you know, well, you go through life, somebody's got to put you on the right track, else you fuck.
I mean, the whole film is a cyclical story. You've got Catherine, who found Holly and gave her her break and in a way saved her from the streets. And then you're following Holly's story, who then finds Shay and saves her in the same way. So it's like this cyclical story of women.
I think that I was particularly interested in the story because it's really about two females, and I think that often this world is a very sort of male world, and this film is really from the perspective of those two women, like an 17-year-old and a 30-year-old woman. So I think that set it apart from a lot of those sort of genre type films in this setting.
I think that the aspect of it being the two leads being women is definitely what attracted me to the script, without question. That we see representations of these type of stories, everything from, you know, The Godfather to The Sopranos to Underbelly, where women are flesh in the shot to make things look good. You know, it feels like, whereas this is the opposite to that. This is through the eyes of the women. And as you say, them being sex workers or not, in one way is totally irrelevant. What they are is two strong women. It's
a very easy and common thing for people to know. She's like, she's a prostitute. We didn't want to show that. We wanted to show, you know, like she cares, and she's a beautiful girl. You know, it was very important, I think, that it was about two, not just women, but two strong women who were going through a lot.